and let us tell you a story. But wait, what is a story? The dictionary defines it thusly: a narrative, either true or fictitious, in prose or verse, designed to interest, amuse, or instruct the hearer or reader. Wow, that's dry. I think we can do better. Let's look first at the components of a story. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And while each of these three components is quite important, some would argue that the beginning is almost more important than the other two. The beginning must be good. Two households, both alike in dignity in fair Verona, is where we lay our scene. Or maybe it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Or even, once upon a time. Then there's the middle. But to define the middle, we really have to talk about some other little pieces, because the middle can't exist without them. What are these pieces? First, characters. They'll come in and mess with everything, which is a little like life. But without them, there isn't much of a story, which is a little like life. A character could be the guy. An interesting character would be the crazy guy. Or perhaps the lovely girl in the coffee shop with the mischievous grin. Or even the stunningly beautiful queen, who was really a wicked stepmother, disguised as a wretched hag. Now that's a character. Give these characters the second little piece that the middle is missing, a conflict, and we'll really have a story. Something they must overcome, a problem they must solve. Perhaps they must resolve their considerable differences and band together to destroy an evil reign. Whatever it is, the middle is all about these characters working through these conflicts, but not just working through these conflicts in order to alleviate discomfort or solve a problem, but soldiering on through conflict and trial and trouble in order to emerge on the other side changed. Sometimes subtly and sometimes profoundly. Sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. But always transformed. Add a resolution and the story is complete. If it's a comedy, they'll all be happy. If it's a drama, they'll all be in tears. If it's a tragedy, well, they'll all be dead. Whatever it is, the story will come to a close. The end. Beginnings, middles, ends, characters, conflicts, resolutions. This is a story. But is it? You see, every story you've ever heard is really only a part of the story. The beginnings, middles, and ends of most stories, of our stories, are rarely the beginnings, middles, and ends. Instead, they're the arbitrary beginning, middle, and end of the story as it's being told. Am I losing you? Let me give you an example. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Cinderella. Then along came wicked stepmothers, ugly stepsisters, fairy godmothers, ball gowns, pumpkin carriages, Prince Charmings, chiming clocks, glass slippers, and of course, happily ever after. But you may be shocked to learn that there is an ever after happily ever after, but that's not the part of the story that we've been told. Likewise, long before glass slippers and chiming clocks and Prince Charmings and pumpkin carriages and ball gowns and fairy godmothers and ugly stepsisters and wicked stepmothers, and even before once upon a time, there was a little girl who was born and who lost her parents somewhere along the way. Before her parents were their parents, and they had adventures as well, and there were adventures before their adventures. My point is that the story of Cinderella is only a part of the story of Cinderella. It's just a little bit of the Cinderella that existed between Once Upon a Time and Happily Ever After. It's just the part of the story that the storyteller wants us to notice. He's focused our attention on a certain set of people in a certain point in time, in a certain set of circumstances, that through them we might be drawn in and have the curtains drawn back, that we might see the world in a new way, that we might see ourselves in a new way. Because surely stories are more than just their mechanics. Good stories are more than simply the sum of their parts. In good stories, we see ourselves stretched out in the span between the beginning and the end. We see pieces of us in the characters and pieces of our circumstances in their circumstances. Because sometimes we're forgotten among the cinders and ashes. And sometimes we awake to recognize that change is possible. Cinderella was transformed. She was once a forgotten stepsister, but she became an enchanting princess. And in our hearts, we yearn for the same kind of transformation. And these kinds of stories, the good kinds, tell us a little bit about who we are and what we can become. The same is true of another story, a very good story. and it begins with "in the beginning." Now that's a good beginning, and it's our very own Once Upon a Time. But like with any story, that's not really the beginning. This story has been going on long before the beginning, but this is just the start of the story that the storyteller wants us to notice. The characters that enter the stage and leap from the pages of this story are the characters that the storyteller knows we can identify with. But what's more, there are pieces of the storyteller himself woven throughout these stories too. Clues, things that tell us who he is and what he's like. Because this story is far more than your everyday fairy tale. These characters are more than just characters. These are people who have encountered God. They've walked with him, they've wronged him, and they've worshipped him. But they've also been changed by him. They've been transformed by him. And for all of these reasons, these characters are pictures of us. We can identify with them. But more than just identifying with the characters of this story, we are the characters of this story. We are the ones who are transformed by it, that are still being transformed by it. Because there hasn't been a happily ever after tagged on to the end of this story just yet. It's still being written, and it's far bigger than just our story. This is his story. The story of God existed before in the beginning, and it continues with us. As we hear this story, we will discover who we are. We will see where we fit. We will better understand the world around us, the wonder within us, and the one who is with us. And this story comes with a promise that if we know it and if we take it into our hearts, we will be transformed. The end. But not really.